DND number 9, Circle of Life in Jesus' Name, Chapter 17. April 23rd, Tuesday morning, Tanner home, Pine Forest, Georgia. After a discussion with Grandmaster Keno on the pros and cons of Gabe watching his own abduction video, the Tanners sat together in their den, the video cast up on their large screen TV. The two youngest twins, Daisy and Lily, had already seen it and had no wish to watch it again, so they took Iris out for the day. Just like in the training video Grandmaster Keno had made to allow Keegan to see what Gabe had been through without having to explain it, the family getting to see what happened to him without him having to explain it was something somewhat comforting. Being reminded of things he had already blocked out was also good for him. Mia had taken out the part right after his pseudo-surgery where Mia thought about molesting him, and he was relieved because he didn't want the world to know about that part. It was embarrassing. She also took out the part where she told her own story. Still, she added in the part after that where he tried talking to her even though she didn't respond, and where the men built the box and Gabe fought with them, and the part where he tried to tell her that it wasn't going to end well for her no matter what. 3 hours later, when it was over, they sat quietly. Gabe didn't say a thing because he truly didn't know what to say. Heather came and knelt down in front of him. "Hey, little brother, I'm so proud of you. You were strong, and you tried to reason with her, and you tried to fight, and I hope you see it like that." He shrugged. "Thanks, Heather. So, pretty much everyone, all my teammates, everyone at school, they've all seen this, right?" He glanced around at his family, and they all were nodding their heads. His eyes welled with tears, but he choked them back. He stood and cleared his throat. "Well, nothing to do but face it. I told the coach I'd come and support the team in the dugout for today's game. Is that okay?" Lizzie looked at Keegan. Physically, she thought it would be too much too soon, but emotionally, it might be the best thing he could do. Just get the embarrassment over with and be there for the team. So she nodded. "We'll all go," Keegan said. "I have to check in with work. Let's eat a late lunch, and then we'll go. You take a few minutes to rest." Gabe nodded. New scene. Jake pulled away from the kiss when his cell phone vibrated. It was serendipity because he'd been toying in the back of his brain with the idea of breaking vows and breaking promises and giving in to weakness. Lena was being the most comforting balm to his broken soul, or maybe it was the primal post-war reaction syndrome the guys had been talking about yesterday morning. Whichever it was, pulling away from her at the present moment, with her lying there on the soft grass under the tree beside the meadow, her gorgeous red hair loose and blowing, his fingers on the top button of her overshirt. It was one of the hardest things he'd ever done. He glanced at the phone. "Hey, Dad, everything okay?" His father chuckled. "Well, I can tell that means you don't want to be disturbed, which probably means I should absolutely disturb you." Jake took a deep breath. "Yep, you're probably right." Lena reached up and splayed her hands over his chest, and he closed his eyes in defense. "Gabe has watched the video and is struggling a bit," John went on. "He's decided to attend the game today, a place of honor in the dugout. I was hoping you and Lena would tag along in support, at least for the first half. If you want to disappear after that, then go ahead." "Hold on," Jake said, then raised his brow at Lena. "Did you hear?" "Yes," she said, giggling. Well, of course I want to go." He smiled at her, shook his head in wonder. "Where have you been all my life?" Right here," she responded, her eyebrows raised. It was a rhetorical question, he quipped, then turned back to the phone. "Yeah, Dad, we'll be there." "Sounds good. See you there." "Hey, Dad?" "Yep." "So is that primal post-war thing a real thing?" John chuckled. "Yes, son, it's real. And I'm not going to preach at you because I know you know right from wrong. But if you don't have protection, then you'd better put it on ice." Jake nodded. "Copy that." New scene. It's April 23rd, Tuesday evening, at the Buxton Hills High School, Pine County, Georgia. They all came. The The Apples, the Stewarts, and the Tanners. It wasn't a home game, so they found seats in the bleachers on the third base side. They thought at first that it was so crowded because Buxton Hills was a larger high school, but once they really looked at the crowd, they realized it was still happening. Everywhere they looked were Pine Forest shirts, the majority with Team Gabe printed on the back. Gabe didn't go up into the bleachers, but instead made his way on crutches to the gate that opened onto the field. He didn't have his uniform to wear except for his cap, which he wore with pride. Jake stayed on one side of him, Lena on the other. However, once Peyton spotted him, there was no need. A whoop and holler went up, and his teammates all ran to greet him, jumping up and down all around him, but being careful not to touch his shoulders or to knock him over. They rubbed his head and pulled on the bill of his cap and patted his back and escorted him into the third base dugout. The crowd had seen him as well and was chanting, "Tanner! Tanner!" At his team's insistence, he went to the side of the field and tipped his cap. He added a tap on his heart to show his gratitude for their support. That sent them into a frenzy. Back in the dugout, the coach gave a speech about keeping up their spirits and then asked Gabe if he had anything to say. Gabe nodded. "You guys don't need me. We're good because we're a team. You got this. Focus and support each other." Coach nodded. "He's right. We got this. Okay. Anyone who wants to pray can pray. Anyone who doesn't want to pray, don't. No judgment, no division. All good, all team." "All good, all team," the boys repeated. "Gabe, you ain't good for nothing else tonight, so give us a prayer," Coach said as the guys all laughed. They took off their caps while Gabe prayed. The announcer started introducing teams as they lined up along their respective lines. At the end of the intros, Gabe looked up sharply, surprised to hear them actually speaking about him. This wasn't even his home field. They spoke about him being taken, about him miraculously being back, and invited him to the middle of the field to shake hands with the captains and coaches and umpires. It took him a bit to make it out there on his crutches. It was painful, not because of his leg, but because using the crutches required him to use his arms and shoulders, which currently were damaged goods. At one point he swayed, and a few guys from the other team ran out to help steady him. This touched him more than anything, and apparently the crowd felt the same way, for they applauded a very long time. It was a much better feeling than being thrown at. Well, unless he scored, he thought with a smile. Gabe stayed on the field for the national anthem, but instead of simply turning toward the flag, this school had their ROTC color guard present the colors. Before that, though, they invited the veterans and active military onto the field. Gabe watched as his father, Master Apple, Jake, and Uncle Chaz, and others made their way to the field, and instead of waiting for the song to begin, they came immediately to attention for the presentation of colors. His heart swelled with pride, as usual. Unfortunately, his body began to tremble from the strain of standing for so long, and he began breathing hard. The anthem ended. The vets remained at attention until the flag left the field, and Gabe thought he might collapse. He looked up at his father as he turned, and he and Jake came immediately to his side and helped him back to the dugout. "You're looking a little pale there, son," Keegan stated. "Maybe this wasn't such a good idea." "I was just standing a long time. I'm okay. I'll sit down and drink some water. Don't tell Mom." "You really think she doesn't know?" Gabe smiled as he sat down and was handed a bottle of water. "Well, tell her I'm okay anyway." He did tell her, several times, and the game turned out to be a long one. The rebels battled hard against the Buxton Hills Bulldogs, with Gabe yelling and whistling and talking them up and calling out encouragement the whole time. And by the 7th, rebels barely eked out on top 7-6. They just had to get 3 outs. First batter struck out, second batter got on, third batter walked, meeting on the mound. Next play, a 1-6-3 double play. Rebels win. After the game, guys from both teams made it a point to shake Gabe's hand, which he appreciated. And after that, girls from the whole country crowded around him, which he did not appreciate. Not because he was being snobby, but because he was feeling pretty shaky, and he thought it would be really bad if he were to throw up in front of them. He was very glad when Jake and Lena came to rescue him, made apologies and excuses, having the girls all worrying about his well-being, and stole him away to his family's vehicle. He closed his eyes and fell asleep before they even got out of the crowded parking lot. New scene. It's April 23rd, Tuesday evening. Keno Estate, Crystal Cove, California. Jeffy looked around the dinner table. Finally, her whole family was together. They'd been there during the Gabe abduction, but she and Cam and Joey had not been. She'd asked them all to stay for dinner now that everyone was back home. She smiled at her husband. He took her hand and squeezed it. She nodded at him, and he spoke. "Okay, everyone, if I can have your attention," Cam said. The table quieted. Eric and Shelley smiled. "Jeffy and I would like to make an announcement." He nodded at his wife, and Jeffy smiled. "We're going to have a baby," she said quickly. The people at the table remained quiet. "Doesn't anyone have anything to say?" Jeffy asked. "Oh, we figured you had more to say," Jojo laughed. "Yeah," young Eric said, that's it? No lecture on ovulation and conception and the statistics on the odds of you conceiving at this particular point in time? Ha ha, very funny, you guys. Everyone then burst into laughter and went about congratulating the couple. Bree got up from the table and came to hug her sister, and they cried for a second or two and excitedly discussed how much fun this is going to be. Taylor watched with pleasure. She's going to have a new cousin. It was beautiful and wonderful, and she sighed because the first thing she wanted to do was call Gabe and tell him. She wondered what he thought about babies and stuff like that. Would he be excited or just shrug it off like he didn't care? She looked up at the large clock on the wall to her left. 6:30. It would be 9:30 in Georgia right now. She wondered if she could eat quickly and slip away and make the call before Gabe was asleep. She knew he had a game and was going to go sit in the dugout and watch. She wondered how that went. She wondered if he was even home yet. She wondered if his team was able to pull off a win without him playing. Having a hunch that people would have been there and put up videos and pics of him, she quietly pulled her phone from her jeans back pocket, held it down in her lap, and pulled up TikTok. She was right. There he was, standing in the middle of the field on crutches, shaking hands with umpires, his hat in his hand and his hand over his heart during the national anthem. Some guys from the other team, each holding him by the elbow, a close-up of his face bruised on one side, but his blue eyes, clear and beautiful, his long dark lashes framing them perfectly, his dimple in his left cheek visible. She sighed. "Taylor." Her father's deep voice startled her, and she dropped her phone, bent over to pick it up, then looked up at him. "No phones at the table," he reminded her. "Sorry. May I ask what is so important that you just had to look at it right now during dinner?" I was looking to see if anyone had put up pics of Gabe from his game today." "I see." "I'm sorry, but I just miss him so much, and I wanted to see if he's doing okay." "I understand." "Do you, Dad? I mean, really?" Her words were said a bit sarcastically. "I believe I do, Taylor. But when you're in a long-distance relationship, which apparently you are, then you have to learn how to focus on the present moment, on the here and now, and take care of the business at hand." Her eyes filled. "Well, how can I do that when all I can think about is him? Or you probably don't understand that because you men can just turn your feelings off at the drop of a hat. Focus. Do your job. Ugh." Jojo, young Eric, and Logan all raised their arms in a "what did we do" kind of gesture. "Where is she getting this stuff?" Ricky asked, appealing to his wife. Bree shook her head. "Well, it's not coming from me, if that's what you mean. It must be from school. I ought to pull her out of that place right now, and I would if I thought that would help," Ricky said. "May I be excused?" Taylor asked. "No, you may not," Ricky stated firmly. "Taylor, calm down," Bree said softly. "Your father said he understood your feelings, and if he said that, then it's true. He wouldn't lie to you." "Well, why does he have to tell me to stop thinking about Gabe then? He wouldn't say that if he understood." "Honey, he was trying to give you direction and how you can stop hurting by focusing on the current situation, which is sitting here having dinner with your family. He was telling you that to keep you from hurting. And Taylor, it's not fair. It's not fair to state that men can just turn their feelings off. First, if they can, I'd say it's a good trait to have. But I know that they hurt too, just like we do. Just like we do when they can't be with the ones they love. Well, then how can he expect me to just stop thinking about Gabe? It's like he doesn't have any emotions. Ricky drew a deep breath and shook his head. Taylor, Bree pressed on, in general, us girls may be a bit more emotional than men, but not always, and there's nothing wrong with men being men. Their masculine qualities are not a bad thing. They are not toxic like you may be hearing lately. Men being masculine is a good quality, and it's what attracts us to them. I love how strong your father is. It makes me know I can depend on him, and I know he knows he can depend on me, like right now, for example. And I also love how your dad is able to focus on solutions and do what has to be done, even when he'd rather just lie down and cry. Taylor glanced up at her father, thinking about the fact that she may have hurt the feelings she'd said he didn't have. What do you like about Gabe? Taylor looked up. The question had come from Grandma. She shrugged. He's kind, and he's funny, and he's smart, and he's strong, and he's responsible, and he works hard, and he... Don't stop, Shelley prodded. And he what? What were you going to say? She sighed. And he takes care of business, and he takes care of me. Bingo, Jojo murmured. And don't forget that he's totally hot, Bree said, trying to break the tension. There was a murmur of laughter, and Taylor glanced at her Aunt Breeze. She was married to Uncle Joey, the second in command of the Meritech, a Keno Challenge champion several years over, and very badass kind of guy. Aunt Breeze was a strong lady, an amazing artist, and she was not intimidated by her husband at all. They had 2 girls and baby Ledger, and Uncle Joey took over with the kids whenever he wasn't at work. And Taylor had to admit that bad Uncle Joey was really sweet when he was playing with Sophia and Kelston. He was much rougher when he played with Ledger, who was only 2. It was endearing, not insulting. Taylor looked over at Aunt Bella, who was Breeze's sister and married to her Uncle Mark, who was Joey's older brother. Uncle Mark was a defense attorney, a former football standout, and a Keno Challenge champion, and he had to work a lot. He was Logan's and JoJo's father, and Emily, who was only 3 and currently being rambunctious and sitting on her daddy's lap so that Aunt Bella could have a few minutes to eat. Taylor knew that her Aunt Bella had been terribly abused during her first marriage to Logan's father. She'd heard the stories, how Mark and Joey had been working on rescuing her when Logan ended up having to kill his own biological father to save his mother's life. Mark was taking care of his family. He adopted Logan. He loved Bella so much that you'd never know she was once a shy, timid, abused lady. These men in her life were definitely strong men, and their hearts were definitely filled with love, and she felt contrite to have said the things she did. Her own brother, Eric, had been her constant companion and protector, and he in no way was toxic, though he was very masculine and strong. I'm sorry, Dad, for what I said. I just don't know what to do with how I feel. I just love him so much, and I want to be close to him. Again, daughter, I understand. Let's talk about this love for a minute. When you truly love someone, you want to be in service to them. Taylor nodded. I'd do anything for Gabe. Ricky smiled. Well, this was a pretty personal discussion, but Taylor was always so wide open with her feelings. What do you think he would want you to do? Would he want you sitting here hurting because you're not together? No, I guess not. He's taking care of business, is he not? He went to the game today. He was focusing on helping his team win that game in any way he could help, right? Yes. So what can you do for him? Do you mean like give myself to him? Several people choked on their food, and Ricky closed his eyes. That was most certainly not what he meant. Why would you think that's what I meant? No, that is not what I meant. You cannot serve Gabe by breaking God's laws, and he wouldn't want you to. At least I don't think he would. But I now know where your mind is at, and I'm thinking the rest of this discussion will be had in private. She looked down and sighed. Yes, sir. I want Tay-Tay, Emily said loudly. Taylor looked up. May I take Em down to the playroom for a little while? Go ahead, Ricky said. Taylor got her cousin and left quickly. What the hell was that? Ricky murmured after she left. Eric, who'd been silent the whole time, laughed. I think it's an omen of what the next few years are going to be like. You better get ready. It's going to be a roller coaster ride. Jeffy glanced at her father, and their eyes met. He gave her a smile. New scene. Taylor was glad. Excuse me. Taylor was glad when she finally, at her own home, in her own room, was alone. It was late, and she hoped her father didn't want to continue the discussion tonight. She told her family good night. She sat on her bed and pulled out her phone and scrolled through some of the videos and pics from Gabe's game today. She was totally stalking him, she thought with a smile. She looked at the time. It was after 8, which meant it was after 11 in Georgia. But she couldn't resist. She called him, and he answered on the third ring. Hey, Taylor, he said sleepily. Hey, it sounds like I woke you up. It's okay. It's good to hear your voice. Yours too. I'm sorry it's so late, but we had a family dinner at the Grand's house, and I just got home. Sounds fun, he yawned. Any special reason? Yes, actually. Jeffy wanted to announce that she's going to have a baby. Really? That's cool. Yeah, everyone is pretty stoked. I bet. We were all pretty excited when my mom got pregnant and had Iris a few years ago. She's the best. She's really cute, Taylor agreed, smiling. She was glad she had a good attitude about it. So, when is the baby due, he asked. In 7 months, so November. Fun stuff. Yep, so how did it go at your game today? We won. Yeah, I saw that. You saw it? It was online. A bunch of people made videos and stills of you at the game, and I saw the score. Oh, well then why'd you ask? I wanted to know how it went for you. Oh, well, it was tiring, but it was pretty cool. I mean, I wasn't nearly as embarrassed as I thought it would be. As I thought I would be. Why would you be embarrassed? Because everyone in the world has watched the video of my abduction. They've seen me cry. They've seen me bleed. They've seen me scream in pain. There's nothing on that video that should make you embarrassed, Gabe. You were so strong, and you fought those men and shot a couple of them. That was pretty badass. And you were nice to the girl who had you kidnapped, and you tried to reason with her, and that prayer you said, that was so sweet. He sighed. Yeah, well, when I was praying, I forgot about the fact that it was being videoed. And that's exactly what was so cool about the prayer. You were not thinking about performing for the camera. You were just being you. That's why everyone loves it. That's why I love it. Well, thanks, but it's still embarrassing. I mean, I flat out said I was scared, and I cried more than once. So you have feelings. That's cool, too. You know, there are parts to the video that aren't in the video she put out, like when she pulled the bullet out of my leg or when she told me why she went after me and other stuff. Really? I'd like to see that, or at least know what happened. He sighed. Ask Jason. He has the whole thing. He paused. Except, I just remember that there's one part I don't want you to see. Never mind. Don't ask Jason. What don't you want me to see? Tell me. He was silent. Gabe? He blew out a breath. What happened? I don't know how to say it. I wish I hadn't told you at all. Well, I feel like I could tell you anything. Don't you feel the same about me? Yes, I do, but you are so young and innocent. And what does that have to do with anything? And I'm only a year younger than you. Yeah, I know. Gabe, just tell me. She had thoughts of... He stopped. I just really don't want to talk about this. I can't. Not now. Okay. I'm sorry I pressured you. I won't ask again. Thank you. She was silent for a few moments. I miss you so much, she finally said. Me too. I miss you too. She giggled. I know what you mean. He chuckled. I wish you were right here beside me. Me too, Taylor said. What would you do if I was there beside you? I would kiss you a long time. That sounds really good, she sighed. What else would you do? He was quiet for several moments. I don't think we should play this game. Yeah, I think you're right. I asked my dad tonight if I should give myself to you. He sat straight up. What? What? Why? Why would you do that? We were having a discussion. Why? You sound upset. I am upset. I don't want your family to have any reason to not bring you here in 2.5 weeks. Why, Taylor? Why would you ask that? Well, we were talking about what I could do for you to show you that I love... She stopped. Wow, she'd almost said it again. And it's not that she needed him to say it first, but what if he doesn't feel as strongly as she does and it scares him away? Then she would be devastated. Hello? Sorry, we were talking about ways that I could show you how much I care, and I said I could give myself to you, and he was not in agreement about that. Good grief, I'm surprised he didn't ground you right then and there. I didn't think about that. The words just popped out of my mouth. What did your dad say? Exactly. He said God wouldn't want me to break his laws, even to show you how I feel. I agree with your dad. I could say, of course you do, in a good way or in a bad way. What do you mean? I could say, of course you agree with my dad because you're both guys and guys tend to stick together. Or I could say, of course you agree with him because you're very close to God and you always try to do the right thing. So that means you agree with him too. How's that? You just said it would be the right thing to obey God's laws. She sighed. Well, aren't you just so smart? He gave a short laugh. Taylor, I don't want to come off as holier than thou, so I have to be honest. I've thought about what I would do if you were lying next to me. I've thought about it a lot. I just hope when the time comes, I'll be strong enough to do the right thing. Well, I'm not sure if I hope that or not, Taylor said. Well, I am sure, Taylor, because when you care about someone, you do the right thing, no matter how hard it is. She was silent a long time and finally said, Oh, Gabe, the things you say, you just made me cry. Sorry. No, they're happy tears. She made a quick decision. What you said makes me so happy, Gabe, because I am so in love with you. I just want you to know that. Don't say it back, just know. She hung up. Hello? He smiled, stretched out and closed his eyes, completely satisfied with himself. New scene. It's April 24th, early Wednesday morning, Stewart Ranch, Pine Forest, Georgia. Chaz looked out across the field at a horse and rider galloping toward him. He hoped it wasn't an emergency. Jake pulled back on the reins and brought Santana to a halt right in front of him. Hey, Jake, everything okay? Jake smiled and nodded. Uncle Chaz, do you have a minute to talk? Sure. Jake swung off the horse. It's about Lena. No kidding, Chaz said with a chuckle. Jake smiled. How do you think she's doing? As far as her recovery from the assault. Chaz gave a final tug to the fence he'd just repaired. I think she's doing well. Physically, she's almost back to normal. The bruises are gone. She doesn't limp anymore. Mentally or emotionally, she's getting there. Shelley and Jeffy were a huge help, along with the EFT from your father. The counselor recommended by Eric seems to think that she's well on the road to recovery. How do you think she's doing? Well, I think she's doing great. We talk about it. She doesn't break down anymore. She seems happy and back to her playful self. I realize it's normally not this easy, but maybe Jeffy worked a miracle, or maybe that EFT. I know miracles are possible. Still, all in all, she seems 1,000 times better. He looked down for a second. My dad told me he used EFT to help you, but he wouldn't tell me what you needed it for. He said I should ask you. Was it PTSD from your military days? Chaz nodded. Yes and no. It was PTSD, but not from when I was in the military. Oh. Is it too hard to talk about? 'Cause I'll just shut up. No, it's not too hard. The EFT helped me, and that's why I can talk about it. Before your Aunt Lisa, I was married to my high school sweetheart. Her name was Carrie. Oh, I had no idea. Does Lena know? Yes, of course. We don't talk too much about it, though. It's done. I came home from the Marines, became a paramedic for the county, married Carrie, and had the cutest little girl, Julie. Oh, wow. I didn't know you had another child. Chaz nodded. I was on duty. We got a call of an accident, a vehicle hit by a drunk driver, and when I got to the scene, I discovered the victims were my own wife and daughter. They were both gone. It was a pretty gruesome scene. Uncle Chaz, I am so sorry for your loss. Wow. So sorry. He nodded. Thank you. I could not get over it. I was dying slowly every day. 3 years later, I met your Aunt Lisa and fell madly in love with her, but almost every time I kissed her in my mind's eye, she became the bloody corpse of my dead wife. I had dreams and visions and episodes that made me want to take my own life. And then your mom and dad came here, moved into what is now the inn, and your father saved my life with his EFT. It works. I had no idea. All because of a drunk driver. Such a loss. Well, as it turned out, it wasn't a drunk driver after all. They were murdered, but that's another whole story for another time. His mouth opened, but he had no words. Chaz smiled. So, you think Lena is doing well, almost back to her normal self? Jake brought himself to the original subject, and he nodded. And? Chaz asked. And? And what's your point? You didn't ride all the way out here to ask me how Lena's doing. Oh, yeah, it's just that I've been home almost a month. That only gives me 5 more unless I'm called back early. It's not a lot of time. A lot of time for what? To plan a wedding. No. No? Jake, you're jumping the gun. Well, I know that I love her. I know I want her to be my wife. I know I want to take care of her and protect her. And what does she want? Chaz asked. Well, she doesn't know. She's not sure about the vet thing anymore. She's not sure about much of anything other than her love for me. Have the two of you already talked about marriage? Well, not in so many words. I mean, we know we're going to be together. I haven't proposed to her, if that's what you're asking. Jake, Lena was raped a little less than 3 weeks ago. The week before that, she wouldn't even speak to you. We've already had this discussion. I would love to have you as my son-in-law, but when the timing is right. Well, when will that be, Uncle Chaz? She's apparently been waiting on me for years already, and that's my fault, and I don't want her to have to wait another minute. When I leave on deployment, I want her to know I'm coming home to her, and I want her to know that I am totally committed to her. Please, I need for you to understand. I understand where you're coming from, Jake. I do. But she'll know you're totally committed to her if you're engaged to her. It's only been 3 weeks since she was assaulted. She's not in her right mind yet. Maybe when it's been 3 months, then you can propose. And when you come back, we'll have a giant wedding. And what if I don't come back? Chaz stood there looking to the sincere eyes of a young man that he loved, a young man who loved his daughter, and a young man whose father was Chaz's best friend. He didn't want to even consider Jake not coming back, but he's right. If they weren't married and he didn't come back, Lena would have nothing left of him, not even his name. Finally, he placed his hand on Jake's shoulder and nodded. I tell you what, this decision cannot be made right here by me alone. So let's have a meeting. You, your parents, and Lisa and I, and we'll discuss every single angle of this, and we'll see what happens. Is that fair enough? Jake nodded with a sigh. Fair enough, sir, I guess, he added. He turned and whistled for Santana and mounted. I'll arrange the meeting, Jake said shortly, and rode off quickly. Chaz watched him go, sighing heavily. The young man was angry right now and determined. He shook his head. Heroes. Warriors. Why couldn't he simply want to take over his father's martial arts studios? Why do these young bucks feel they have to go off and put their lives on the line? He grimaced as he admitted that he himself had done the exact same thing. New scene. April 24th, Wednesday, 3:10 a.m., South Keno Estate, Crystal Cove, California. Taylor woke out of a sound sleep, glanced at her phone. It was just after 3 in the morning. She could hear voices. Her father's deep voice and her mother. It sounded like she was crying. She heard her brother say something too, and her heart started beating hard. She was almost afraid to open her door to see what was happening. She peeked out and saw her brother's bedroom door open. She went quietly downstairs and headed to her parents' bedroom. She stopped at the head of the corridor. Her brother was standing in their bedroom doorway. He turned his head and looked at her. "What's happening?" Taylor asked. Young Eric came to her and put his hands on her shoulders. "Grandpa Robert has passed away." Taylor's mouth fell open. "Oh, no. How? Was he sick?" "It was a heart attack." "Poor Grandma Camille. She'll be all alone." Eric nodded. "Mom's going to fly out in the morning with Uncle Mark and Uncle Joey. We'll come out later for the funeral." "Is it okay if I go in and hug Mom?" "Of course." Taylor patted down the hall and peeked into her parents' bedroom. Her father was standing in the middle of the room. Her mom was leaning against his chest. Goodness, we'll let that pass. Taylor patted down the hall and peeked into her parents' bedroom. Her father was standing in the middle of the room. Her mom was leaning against his chest, and he had her securely wrapped in his arms. She was crying softly, and he was kissing the side of her head. It was a beautiful sight, and she suddenly remembered her little tantrum earlier at dinner and felt ashamed, because at this moment she was indeed grateful for her father's strength and for him being a rock for her mom, for him being able to offer her the comfort and support her mother needed at this hard time. Taylor thought of her Grandpa Robert. He was her mother's biological father. It was weird to think that Grandpa Robert and Grandma used to be married. She couldn't imagine her beautiful grandmother with anyone but her granddaddy Eric. Taylor didn't get to visit with Grandpa Robert and Grandma Camille very often. They lived in San Francisco, and they almost never came down the coast to visit. But Eric and Taylor had gone up to visit them at least twice a year. It was weird now that it would no longer be possible to see Grandpa Robert. Taylor finally walked into the room, and her mom turned from her father's embrace to hug her. "I'm sorry, Mom." Bree sniffed. "It's okay, sweetie. Thank you. Are you okay?" "Yes, I'm fine. I'm just worried about you. I'm just wondering about your relationship with Grandpa Robert. You didn't get to see him much, did you?" "No, not really. Before I got married, I visited with him most every summer. We weren't real close, but it's strange how strongly I feel the loss." "But he was a Christian, right?" Taylor asked. "He was at the end. He said he could see how being a Christian had changed his children's lives, and he was intrigued, and he started learning, and he even got baptized. So don't worry, Mom, you'll see him again." Ricky smiled. Bree started to cry again. "Oh, Taylor, you are so faithful. Thank you, sweetie." They hugged again, then Bree looked up. "I need to call and tell Mom." She sat down on the bed and picked up her phone. Taylor looked up when her father rubbed his strong hand over her hair. He smiled warmly at her, his eyes moist, and she felt tears come to her eyes. Her strong father was not void of emotion like she'd accused him. He was not only her mother's rock, but her rock as well. She turned and threw herself against him. "I love you, Dad. Don't you ever leave me." He hugged her close. "Not anytime soon, baby girl." New scene, April 24th, Wednesday, 3:30 a.m., Keno Estate, Crystal Cove, California. Shelley startled when her phone went off. She quickly reached for it and almost knocked the lamp over, but was able to grab it before it fell. Eric sat up immediately and turned on the light. A phone call in the middle of the night was never good. He heard Shelley's gasp. He saw the tears come to her eyes. He stood and went around the bed to sit next to her, praying it wasn't about one of the children or grandchildren. She laid the phone down and turned to him, and he waited patiently. "Robert had a heart attack," she finally said. Eric blew out a breath. "He didn't make it?" She shook her head. "No." He put his arm around her shoulders and pulled her close. "I'm sorry, Shelley." She leaned against his chest and sniffed. "Death is so surreal, and yet it's the ultimate reality, isn't it?" "Well put." "The boys and Bree are flying out in the morning. I'll call Camille in the morning to see what I can do. I want to talk to the kids before they fly out." "Whatever you need me to do, let me know," he said. "We'll get through this together like always. I know you have mixed feelings, but I also know he was the father of 3 of your children. And you can talk to me, you know that. I will never judge you, sweetheart." Shelley smiled at her strong husband, who was so kind and compassionate and always willing to serve in any way he can. "I know, Eric. Thank you. I'm not sure how I'm feeling or what I need, but I know you'll help me figure it out. I love you so very much." He held her tight. "And I love you." And that is the end of chapter 17.